Hello, welcome back everybody. We're doing a little virtual tasting here at Old North State Winery. Chef Chris cannot be with me today. I would love to say it's because he's so hungover from his birthday celebrations, but that's really not it. Unfortunately, or fortunately for the business, we're doing really well. We have a big catering going on. He's has to be a part of that. So I'm running solo today with the video. Probably won't be nearly as amusing, but I will carry the torch for Team O&S. Of course, my name's Ed. Those of you that come here every week for our Thursday night tasting get to try 4 wines with tastes of delicious creations of food that Chef Chris creates every single Thursday. For those of you that are going to be joining us virtually, we have 2 beautiful wines and 2 beautiful things to taste in your pickup packet. And we got 2 reds today. Pretty excited about both of these. And Chef has actually had one. This is one of the few times that I was gonna let him in easy. You know, I like to kind of Shanghai him and give him wines he's never had before to get his natural reaction. I was visiting with Andy, and we'll talk about this wine in a second, but I was visiting with Andy and he gave me a bottle to take back to Chef Chris and he had absolutely loved it. So thought I would throw him a softball this time and just figures that he can't be with us today. Well, the show must go on, right? So many of you know that I was in Italy for 3 weeks, well, counting travel time, but it was about 16, 17 days of actual boots on the ground, so to speak. It was a second trip to Europe for me. Of course, Chris and I were in Portugal in March, and then I spent most of April in Italy. Why? Well, because wine's important and wine should be studied and experienced, and that's exactly what I did. So this was a labor of love. I did it for you guys. Just highly recommend, if you ever get a chance, spend as many weeks as you can in northern Italy. The food is phenomenal. The people are hospitable, generous, hardworking, food-loving, drink-loving folks. Drank more delicious coffee than I care to admit and very little water. It was, my body had to go through some adjustments to their lifestyle. I will say this, everybody's, very fit looking over there, you don't see anybody exercising or drinking water. So it must be, the key is eating fresh food every day, drinking lots of fresh wine, of course, and they walk everywhere for the most part. There's not a lot of driving. Boy, I tell you, the driving is nuts. I put 1,600 miles on our rental car driving Mom and Joe, and also Carolyn joined us half the trip too. And it was, those roads are like driveways, but they're driving 18-wheelers down them. Your own driveway is probably bigger than most of those highways. It was a challenge, white-knuckled, but no wrecks. Good deal. Well, let's talk about a couple of wines that I've really wanted to share with you. This is one that I tasted just before I went to Italy. Of course, as soon as I got back, it was Italy. We did not do a video last week, so you didn't get inundated with all those Italian wines that I've been tasting. But I'm sure you will over the course of the year because I tasted so many great wines. But also, as you know, I taste all the wines that get in front of me. This is one that I tasted just before I left. I'm really excited to share this one with you. Now, this is from Bardos, and this is Spanish wine from Ribera del Duero. Now, Ribera del Duero is quickly becoming one of the most notable wine regions in Spain, which basically makes it one of the most notable wines in the world. And because of that, we need to be tasting their wines and understanding their wines are getting more and more complex. Granted, the DO, which is when they actually make it a wine region legally, it's recognized, if you will, by the government as a special area for winemaking. And this was only started in 1982, but winemaking has been going on there for 2,000 years. So it's just in terms of kind of fine tuning things, it's relatively new to what we consider in the wine world. And so, unfortunately, it's kind of catching up to the rest of the places like Rioja and Priorat, the things that we adore from Spain, but it is getting there at a rapid pace. It's a very, it's at a high plateau, so you have high elevation, lots of sun, very, very dry. And this makes ideal conditions for red grapes. Well, white grapes, that's a whole other story. I do love whites from Spain. Most of you know that. But I think you've got to go with their signature grape, Tempranillo. There's certainly a case to be said that it might be Grenache or Garnacha, but for me, Tempranillo screams Spain. It really is their grape in my opinion. And hopefully some of you out there agree with me. So this is a beautiful, it's a reserva level. So this would be requirements of oak aging. This one happens to be 14 months of oak, which is a little bit more than required by law. And then another year in bottle to settle in and let all those components of the oak marry with the natural deliciousness of the fermented Tempranillo to begin with. Tempranillo is quite lovely without oak, but generally speaking, most of the big wines that you're going to have from Spain that are Tempranillo based are going to have a good deal of oak influence. And of course, depending on the oak, you're going to get a big difference in flavor profiles. You know, the old school Riojas with American oak, you know, you get that beautiful dill and coconut. Well, here you're getting French oak, and so we're not going to get those components. You're not going to be confused by this and think that it is a Rioja, because it is not. Even though it is the same grape, French oak makes a big difference in the final product. So what do we get from French oak? Typically, you're going to get baking spices. You're still going to get some vanilla, which is probably the most common element that people will notice from oak. But to me, it's those spices. It's the way it helps layer the fruit into being such a, I don't want to say pedestrian, but fruit can be quite simple in my opinion. And I like to taste a lot of them in my wine, but there's something about it when they're butcher stuffed and kind of picked up by spice. As a chef, of course, you know, I understand the importance of spice, and you can also overspice. And so one of the things that I was noticing in Italy is that there is the correct use of oak and not overly oaking, and so in other words, not overly spicing your wine so you can still taste the actual varietal. Well, I want to dive in. I know this wine well. As a matter of fact, I broke a bottle just before this video and had to watch the poor thing go down the drain. It sure did smell good though. Man, I hate when that happens. But luckily, they're making more. All right, so this is gonna really help settle my nerves after a nerve-wracking day, breaking bottles, getting the catering out. Now it's time to relax. What can I say? Typical Tempranillo from Spain. Going to be pretty high in alcohol. This one's listed at 14.5. It is probably 14.5, maybe a touch more. It doesn't smell or taste alcoholic, but I can certainly feel the alcohol. This is the sign of a great wine, in my opinion, when things are in there, but they don't stand out. They're integrated, they're homogenized. These are things that for me make an elegant wine. Also, with this oak aging that we've had, some of it is 2-year oak, which is less aggressive. So because of that, it's not a complete, vanilla bomb, as Chef Chris might call it that. And this is a little more subdued in the oak because there is some second year along with some first year oak. So you get a beautiful balance of oak and fruit. Now, Tempranillo is a tricky one in terms of how you describe the fruit. I typically, I would say it's more like a fruit cocktail, really. And in a fruit cocktail, usually you're tasting the sum of the parts and not the individual varieties. So in other words, you're not like, oh, I taste cherry, I taste raspberry, I taste great. It's more like I taste the blend. And I always think that that's a great way to describe Tempranillo. It's one of those that the fruit make another flavor and all together, and they don't necessarily stand out and shine on their own. Another interesting thing about Spanish wines, I think, this is just as smooth as silk. So if you like silky wines, or some might say plush, this has got it. Great mouthfeel, great weight, but at the same time, not overly tannic. Even with all that structure from our oak barrels, we're not looking at something that would necessarily be offensive to people that are kind of new to the red wine game. You know, that's one of the tricks of trying to get people into dry wines. Try to stay away from the tannins, or the ones that are so obvious anyway. There's certainly tannins here, but they're so fine and so integrated. It's almost part of the fluid rather than standing alone and kind of attacking your tongue and gums, and which I do like, don't get me wrong. But if you're looking for something that has something of the best of both worlds, I think this is it. It's not a simple fruit wine, although it's really easy to drink. But I would challenge someone saying that it is simple. I know that a lot of people would call this a simple wine because it's easy to drink. But I don't think it's simple. I think there's a lot of things going on here. And I think if you take the time, take a pause, and really taste this wine, you'll see what I'm talking about. Wow. The dryness is so perfect because the fruit is so full and intense. It's almost like your tongue's gonna go overboard with how much fruit. And here comes that beautiful drying to really kind of leach out all the fruit and leave you with a nice clean palate. Now, that is so desirable when it comes to food. And particularly if you have something that is really juicy in front of you. So if your tongue is dry and you have a juicy steak or lamb kebab or whatever it may be, maybe even a chicken or heck, even a grilled mushroom, it's going to taste so much more it's going to emphasize the great attributes of that food because your tongue is dry and wanting to be rehydrated or almost reconstituted and sometimes. But this dryness is very desirable to me because it's not so tannic driven. It's just really dry but not coating. So the very next, there's not going to be this huge buildup of tannins that sometimes you can get from bigger wines that have been oaked for a very long time. That might not make a lot of sense unless you've drank a lot of different wines, but to me, it does make a lot of sense that there's different types of dryness, and this is my kind of dryness right here. So I do prefer dry wines 99% of the time. Of course, there's always a place for a dessert wine with dessert, and maybe even with some foie gras, which we do love our sauternes with. But generally speaking, I'm reaching for dry, but that doesn't mean it can't be fruity. And this is a great example of why. This region is known for, like I said, lots of sunshine. That means the fruit get really, really developed. And when they get developed like that, the fruit and the sugars really do shine. Of course, sugars turn into alcohol, and that's why we have such a high ABV on this. And most people aren't complaining about having a wine with a pretty high ABV. I know I have certain customers that, well, they won't buy a bottle unless it's a certain amount of alcohol, or they'll be somewhat disenchanted by it. And I don't think that's a fair shot towards the wine, but that is personal preference, and wine is all about that. So if you like what you like, is what I say. You know, as your sommelier, I will never tell you you're right or wrong, because you're not. Well, actually, you're always right, but you're never wrong. So you can't lose in wine, but you like what you like. You know, there's certain things that I want to teach people about wine. Doesn't mean you have to like it. Just want you to try it, understand it, and then, you know, move on with your life, right? So another beautiful wine from Spain. As you know, Spain, I probably said it a billion times, they have more land allocated to vines than any other country. And they have lost vineyards that are just, rambling out there that they're still discovering. And that's the case for a lot of old world countries. I learned a lot about that when I was in Italy, that World War II created a lot of issues after World War II with the economy as poor as it was. They didn't have time to replant vineyards or to keep them running in terms of such a long return on investment. 3-4 years before you can even get a penny back on your investment for vineyards. And the cash flow was a serious thing. You needed to get money quickly. And so other crops were grown and wines were forgotten about. So as much as Italy is producing and as much as Spain is producing now, it could be more. And it probably will be more as long as we can continue to support these regions. And gosh, do they need it. COVID really hurt tourism, and these countries really depend on our tourism dollars. That's the case for not only Europe, but also South Africa as well. And so we want to support. It's not that we're not trying to support local. Heck, we make our own wine, and we make a lot of it, and we want to make more of it, and we want to sell more of it. But we also want to take care of our neighbors who honestly have given us the inspiration to make wines in North America. If it weren't for all the great winemaking across the seas, we probably wouldn't be here, would it? So we owe them a debt of gratitude, and what better way to show it than drink their wine? Well, I hope you're enjoying that at home. I have no idea what Chef Chris is going to put in your box, but it'll be good. And that's usually where he and I banter on and on about food and wine, and you're not going to get that today. Although I will say this, I have been eating a lot of food lately. You can probably see it. Got those chipmunk cheeks, and kind of get a little puffy there. But totally worth it. Totally worth it, because it was an absolutely dream trip. And so I ate, and I ate a lot. I was fortunate enough to catch up with some friends when I got back. Got to hang out with Mr. Chris Falk, the chef at Quanta Basta down in Winston. Had some drinks and food with that guy. And whenever I can hang out with my chef buddies, that's a great thing. Everybody keeps asking me where I'm going to go next. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in the Carolinas for just a little while. I enjoyed all the travel, but boy, it's also nice to sleep in your own bed. Well, that was a treat. Now, we're going to move on to our South African wine. Of course, Andy with Elfin's Corner has hooked us up with so many delicious things, and now he's changed his portfolio around, representing some different people, and giving us some different looks at varietals. And this is a first for me. I tried this with him last week. Like I said, I brought a bottle back to Chris. He loved it as well. Moordenaasvlug is the name. If you can see it, I hope you can. There is a mountain in this area. This is in Swartland. It's about 40 miles north of the Cape. Of course, we kind of use that for all of the, triangulation of where exactly is this in the West Cape. So this is a big winemaking area, obviously. But this is not the typical grape that, I've said time and time again. It just seems like French varietals reign supreme in South Africa. And, they've been making wines down there for 400 or 500 years. They are the old world of the new world, as I like to call it. They've been doing it a lot longer than any other new world country. And they have wines that really showcase the microclimates, when you think about, their rugged terrain, extreme elevation changes and soil changes in just a few hundred yards from row to row. Sometimes it can change. And so there's a lot of micro winemaking, I would call it. That's what I love about Andy's portfolio, is these are small run productions, because when you get into the bigger productions, which I'm not opposed to, don't get me wrong, you kind of lose a sense of place. And these certainly have a sense of place. Now, this is Tinta Barroco. This is a red grape from Portugal, and I was just in Portugal with Chris and Tamisa and Sue, and we drank all the wines. Any wine we could get our hands on, we drank it. We drank a lot of it, and the wines are wonderful there. But I thought it was really cool that they're trying some Portuguese grapes in South Africa. It's not very common, like I said, generally speaking, French varietals down there, and they do them very, very well. You're starting to see more and more things with Portuguese grapes grown in areas you wouldn't think of normally. Of course, Bordeaux has allowed a Portuguese grape now. The 1855 Bordeaux law has been changed thanks to the climate change. They need a grape that can handle hotter weather. And we're seeing changes all over the world because of a shift. We're coming out of a small ice age. Of course, now you're getting great wines from Wales. But remember, 1,000 years ago, before the small ice age, they were making wines. This is not new to them. It's just new to us. Us people on the earth haven't seen it. But if history tells us anything, this is nothing new. So what is new is having Portuguese grapes all over the world. Portugal was really kind of on its own. It was sealed up, And so Portugal was living its best life. And then, of course, the British and the Dutch discovered how delicious their wines were, and they started bringing them back. But there was never a lot of transplants from their varietals to other places like you're seeing now. But we've seen a little bit in California, which I'm in favor of. I'm always in favor of people trying different vines in different places of the world. I mean, look at where Riesling has gone. It's crazy. That's one of our best white grapes here in North Carolina. And you look at Viognier. Viognier right here in Virginia. They're probably their most noted white grape. And, Sauvignon Blanc around the world. I mean, New Zealand, come on. It's known as one of the best Sauv Blanc places in the world, and I can assure you that grape did not come from New Zealand. When I think New Zealand, I think, sheep. I don't think of grapes, but they do so well there. And so experimenting with different vines around the world is important. And this is a great out of the gates for me, first South African Portugal varietal, and I really adore this one. It really does have all the characteristics that you'd expect. If you're a Portuguese wine fan, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That full weight that Portuguese wines. It's crazy. It's like they're heavier in weight than other varietals, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people would agree with me there. But they're not over the top, and I wouldn't find them aggressive or offensive or overbearing. It's just a really great combination that you get from Portugal. I think Washington State is probably the closest thing to a Portuguese style. I think it's those long, juicy, long extended days of sun. Almost, the grapes just get a little bit more, skins get a little bit thicker. Beautiful texture here, but the lightness on the finish, which is so classic of South African wines. One of the things I love about South African wines is they do have that sense of finesse and that lightness that they have. So we have like the boldness of the Portuguese red, coupled with that finesse or that airiness that you might get on a finish from a South African wine. It really is a great melt or melding, if you will, of these two things, and kind of stirred around in beauty. I think that they represent both in extremely admirable ways. So you have the fullness of Portugal with the finesse of South Africa in one beautiful bottle. This is going to be something that we're going to feature at an upcoming wine dinner, and I hope that you're able to join us. We're hoping to do one early this summer. Let everybody get through the Memorial Day weekend, and then we'll make our plans, of course, for wine dinners. And Andy, of course, his was the most attended wine dinner we've ever done. So we're excited about having another chance to have him here talking about wines and a whole new portfolio that he has in store for us. Mother's Day is right here we're on the cusp of Mother's Day. We've got all these chef's tables. It's just caterings, and it's just an exciting time for us here. And we appreciate all your support and all the things you do to help bring it in. If you can make it here for Mother's Day this weekend, the spread's always great. And then, a chef's table for lunch or dinner, if you really want to elevate your dining experience. World-class Michelin star type food with wines from all around the world paired with it. What better way to spend time with friends or family while Chef Chris whips up these beautiful creations right before your eyes? Well, what can I say? They're not Italian wines, and I'm very, very okay with that. I'm Italian to death right now, so these are the kind of wines that I was really craving, something fuller, richer, and we got it today with these two buttes, one from Spain, one from South Africa. I think you'll find that both of these are crowd pleasers, and they're also a great way to teach or to bring along someone that's kind of new to the big red wine game. And it's a great way to kind of introduce them to fuller flavors without hitting them with a sledgehammer. And it's simple enough to enjoy with just about any kind of food, but for those wine geeks like me, there's plenty in there to geek out on and to learn a little bit more about terroir and the varietals that grow best. And we know that Tempranillo is always going to do great in Spain. And now we're learning how Portuguese varietals are seemingly going to do quite well in South Africa. My kudos to the beautiful people that made all this possible, and we'll keep exploring the wines that make us happy, make us smile, and bring us joy. Till next time, we'll catch you next week, and hopefully Chris will be with you.